Today, we're visiting Duke University to meet Vihaan Nama, an AI engineer, graduate researcher, and teaching assistant. At Duke, he supports courses like Explainable AI, AI product management, and managing AI in business, breaking down big, complex systems into ideas students can actually use. If you've ever wondered how to make AI education more human or how student learning data could bring something more meaningful than dashboards, Vihaan brings both clarity and care. Let's dive in. Hi, Vihaan. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm so appreciative of you being here to bring your perspective and your expertise on AI to our audience. To get started, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your journey and how you ended up working in the artificial intelligence space.
Perfect. Thank you, Lydia, for having me on this. I'm quite excited as well to start talking about it. About my journey in AI. It all started in undergrad when I was in a small project with a couple of my professors, very nascent stages of my learning of AI. And I was kind of going through the whole research field and wanting to publish my work, wanted to get my voice out there, but I didn't know where to start. And I was very young, very early into it. I was like 18 years old at that point. And my professor told me, like, hey, why don't you build a small AI system that tells you the difference between the advantages of using AI for a problem statement versus doing the same problem statement without AI and seeing how good AI actually works in helping you and does it actually make sense? And I thought this is an amazing idea for me to just get my feet wet, just start working on it. It was a small little project on sentiment analysis, and I decided whether a rule based system was better or an AI system was better. And in this whole process, I noticed that the AI far outperformed a rule based system. And that's when my interest in AI got sparked. And I was like, okay, this is something that can really help us on a larger scale. I was still 18, so it was such a small problem, but I could envision how big this could get. And that's when my interest started. As my career progressed, I worked in multiple places. I've worked in JP Morgan, I've worked in Samsung. I'm currently working at a company called PSNS as an applied AI engineer. And throughout this whole time, I'm also continuously working on research. I worked in multiple research labs in my undergrad. I'm working at the Duke Trust Lab currently right now, and I'm figuring out where AI can take us. And I really feel like AI is the next big thing. And I'm grateful to be able to speak with you today about this.
It's interesting because when you talk about that first project, you were kind of looking at what is human versus machine and how does this work and where to use them. Is that right?
Yeah. So the way I like to think about it is that traditionally all computer programs were written in a particular way where like the humans would actually write the code or in layman's term define the rules. And then this code would be generated and the user would give an input based on his or her rules. You would get an output for the system. But the way I think AI is different is that when it's AI, it makes the rules. You give it the data and you give it the expected output and you tell it, give me the rules. I'm not great at understanding what rules should be made for this data. You figure it out. And that's where I feel AI is different because for the small problem of sentiment analysis, it was basically was tiny small movie reviews, and I was trying to analyze whether they were good or bad. I went through a particular process of doing it, but then I realized the AI had other ways of thinking about it. That was my first look into the field.
That's really helpful for you to kind of flesh out what that means and what that looks like. It reminds me, Ethan Mollick posted recently about the bitter lesson and how if you just feed a lot of data into the machine computer, the computer is going to be able to solve the problem better than when we try and code all of these rules into how it works. And you learned that lesson pretty early on, when you were 18.
Yeah.
So that's kind of incredible that you were thinking about that so early in your professional career.
Yeah, it was amazing. After that, I think all the professional experiences just strengthened that today, like data is so ready. There's so much data out there, and there's so little knowledge that's available from this data that having machines that define these rules and generate patterns, understand certain ways of representing data and how patterns should be recognized within these large corpuses of information. I think that's the next big gold mine there is. And it's already being, you're already seeing that's what's happening. But especially when we look at larger companies, like for example, in my time in JP Morgan, I noticed that a lot of data that was once considered obsolete, which had just thrown away into an archive somewhere, was actually being retrieved back, and everyone they're pulling out records from long ago because there's so much information, that data that they didn't want to sift through. But now that you have AI that's going to be able to help you go through that information, bringing it all back, and they were trying to like, what information can we gain from this? It's something we threw away a long time ago, but actually there might be a lot of gold in here that we can learn from and we can train these models on. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg of where it could be.
That's so exciting because I think a lot of our listeners are people in schools and in education. And education institutions have tons of data. And without AI, there's a lot of interest in using in something called data driven instruction, where you're thinking about what students know. And then you're trying to tailor your teaching around what they actually need instead of just teaching them, word for word what's in the curriculum. You can kind of say, okay, I have this information and I'm gonna tailor what I teach to the needs of my students or these subsets of students. I think that's an example of how teachers have been using data in the past, but AI could take all the loads of data that exists. Obviously, there could be some privacy concerns here, but you have all of this data in a school setting, and you could learn something about students, the way people learn, the trends that have happened over time in a totally new way.
Yeah, it's really just unlocked so many possibilities that just a few years ago, because of even just lack of funding, were considered like such far-fetched goals. But now that there's so much funding, there's so much research, there's so much stuff going on in the field, especially in generative AI, which is the new buzzword that people are throwing out there. I think it is unprecedented. And I think the amount of value that we can gain just from this previous amounts of information that we've just pushed aside, thinking that it might be useless, but actually there's so much information there. I think we can gain a lot.
What are some use cases that you see for businesses or for education institutions? I mean, you're at Duke right now, you're a student, and you're also working as a teacher's assistant, and you have this business experience. So, I don't know, what are some use cases that you see either in the business world and in the educational environment?
But really quick win that I've seen a lot of companies take after diving into this field of AI, like the first thing that they want to do is that they want easy retrieval. And so there's this concept called retrieval augmented generation that was slowly becoming popular after after ChatGPT came out. And where all it basically did was have a very intelligent way to sift through tons and tons of information. Think of it in gigabytes or even like multiple gigabytes of information, and bring out relevant content to the user based on a natural language query. And this is only possible because of LLMs, right? Large language models helped us take this query that the user says, like, hey, can I have information about XYZ? And then it gets converted in the backend. It goes through lots of data, brings back relevant chunks, and then is able to summarize based on the information that it retrieved and based on your query is able to formulate a great answer for you. One of the biggest things that I'm seeing. So along with everything you said, like I'm also working at a company called PSNS as an applied AI engineer. And PSNS is an architectural organization. Now, you would think architectural and AI is completely different. Like, they're on the different spectrums of engineering per se. But actually, I'm seeing such a huge intersection is happening over there where they have so much data, so much information because they're like a 70-year-old firm that needs to be brought back to the user in a very easy to understand way. So I'm building FAQ systems where people can just type in questions and retrieve answers for them. I think this is the first big change that's going to come up and it's already coming up. But with the field of education as well, giving access to information, especially your own information, not just the information that's in the LLM in general, but your own information, giving access to teachers, students, as well as people who are just partaking in the system is such a big win. Because before this, information was, I've always said, while data and information was in abundance, knowledge was scarce. But after the advent of LLMs, I think knowledge is becoming so available for us, and it's just a matter of a simple word away.
When you were talking, I was imagining all this data as like I was imagining the beach actually and all the sand that's on the beach, and it's like so much tiny little grains of sand everywhere. But if you wanted to find that specific grain of sand that could answer your question, it would be impossible. And now you have an
Exactly.
LLM who can that this intelligent technology that can identify the exact little grain of information that you need so that you can make a decision. I love that you just said, could you just say it again?
Information and data was abundant, but knowledge was scarce. I feel now that's completely changed.
I'm curious, you said something a minute ago about a student having access to their own information. And as if you were a student and you had access to your own information, what does that mean? And how do you see that as a value add? What kind of information might someone want?
So, as a student, even looking at a micro use case of just a single student, me as a student, because I'm currently a master's student, has so much notes available on my iPad, on my laptop. I have nearly 100 PDFs every semester that are just stored over there. This information is actually quite useful for me, especially because when I'm in my job, since my job is so related to the field of AI and I'm studying AI, there's so much of stuff that I wish that I could while I'm in my work, I'm like, "Hey, I just learned this last semester, but I don't remember where, I don't remember how. I don't remember if it was my own handwritten research that I did, like, looking up stuff and writing it down. I don't remember if it was my teacher who taught it to me, but I just wish I had that at that instant. Like, if I could just say, like, 'Hey, can you please tell me how to build the system based on my notes?' And my particular note came up because I wrote it in a way that I understood. Oh, if that process became so much easier, that would be such a big win because I feel like it's not just me. I think every student out there writes their own notes, writes their own pieces of stuff that they're writing down in the way that they understand it. For example, if I give my notes to someone else, they might not be able to get it as good as I do. But for me, that is everything that I've learned just over there. And having that access, being able to retrieve without having to go through like going back home, looking through all my notes, spending the whole next few hours like, oh, was it here, was it there, and bringing it back out. Imagine having a small chat interface where I could chat with my own notes, be like, hey, I spoke about topic X a few months ago. I'm building this kind of a project. Do you think I could use that topic and tell me how to build a system? And having an LLM in between, getting that information through various processes and then taking your data and taking your query and being able to generate a good answer for you. I think that would be such a big win in the space of education. And even when it comes to revising before semester examinations or mid semester examinations, I think having an AI buddy, study buddy kind to help you to go through your notes, to be able to quiz you, that really helps as a student. And looking at the lens from a TA, because I'm also a TA, I've TA'd 3 subjects at Duke, which was managing AI in business, explainable AI, which is Dr. Ben's course, as well as AI product management. What I'm seeing in this field is that since AI is such a new domain, that it's even very hard to create educational information because the whole domain is so new. So having something to help you in brainstorming your ideas, having something to help you canvas out your presentations to make it ready, just give it a prompt saying that, hey, I'm wanting a presentation about XYZ. Can you please create a basic version for me? And having that a stepping stool to start from there as your base and move on. Having all that redundant stuff taken care of, I think both in the field of education as well as learning could be a big win.
Yeah, those are such interesting use cases. You get all this information, you're kind of compiling it, but we forget so much. And so even if as you're going through school, some stuff stays with you, but a lot of the papers that you read, the facts become difficult to access. And so if you can build that as you go, especially if you're developing an area of expertise as you are in artificial intelligence, you could really kind of craft a tool that could be focused on that specifically. And the other use case I thought about was if whenever you get feedback on something that you've done, or if a student takes an exam and then you can feed that back into your AI tool, you could then practice based off whatever the areas you needed to improve on. And so it allows you to be a lot more actionable with the feedback because you could take your exam and then upload the PDF and then have a whole new experience where you're able to practice and revise. I think it allows a learner to really take ownership of their education.
Yeah, I think it's really just transforming the way even we learn because I grew up in a time when there was no ChatGPT. I did my whole undergrad without ChatGPT. But now at Duke, I'm seeing a lot of undergrad students using ChatGPT for every assignment that they want, that they have to do. So I did my undergrad in India, and over there, a lot of learning was done in the form of memorization. I think that's how most of the country was doing learning up until recently. A lot of my examinations, my quizzes was literally like, define this, give me the exact definition. But
Mhm.
now with the field of AI, even back then, it was not really required to give you the exact definition. But even with the field of AI, there's no more a need to explicitly remember certain terms and terminologies because you have access to it so easy. I feel that so much brain power can now be used for so many other better things because the redundant heavy lifting can be done by the AI. And you can just focus on discovering, inventing, creating something new, something that people can use and people can love without having to worry about the technical complexities.
Right, it unlocks this whole your brain can only do so many things at a time, and so it frees up this space that you may have been holding all of your memorized facts with. Now you can refer to your AI, and instead, you're thinking about how can I apply those facts to create something totally new.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious because as, I think all of this data is so useful, but on the flip side, there's this privacy element where if you're giving I gave the example a minute ago about sharing your exam results with your AI assistant to help target your learning. But if you do that, there's some data privacy that you're potentially giving up. And so I'm wondering about how you, in your studies or your perspective on data privacy, how AI uses that data, what risks are involved for people who may be interested in taking the information and finding insights about things that may be specific to individuals.
Yeah, for data privacy, it is a very known fact amongst the AI community that anything you put onto ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, any of these major services, unless you explicitly opt out of their retraining or data retention, they are going to retain it and they are going to train their model sometime in the future, maybe even 10 years down the line, your data could be reused, right? So it is a very known fact within the AI community, but outside the AI community, I think it's still not as well known. Even though we are in the space and we're like, oh, this should be quite obvious. But I don't think a lot of people do realize that their information is actually going to be used. And the minute you put it onto their platforms, it automatically becomes their property. And if once it's their property, they have the right to use it when and how they want. Most of these platforms do have small checkboxes which are automatically selected. So you have to actually go and unselect them
Mhm.
to say that please don't use my data. But still, like as much as we do that, we can't ensure what's actually happening in the back end because we are faced with like curtain. We can only see as much as we are given. Even if we do unselected, they say they're not going to be using it, but we don't know what's actually happening on the back end. And to fight this, I think the advent of the open source field of AI has really started booming, especially with a lot of organizations, even the government, let's say, with a lot of proprietary information. They want the power of AI, but they don't want to give out the information because their information is where their secret sauce is. That's where
Mhm.
their business is running. And they can't afford for that to become public information. So nowadays, there's some stuff called open source AI or open source LLMs, and not just large language models, any AI. There's computer vision, recommendation systems. There are a lot of models available online in the open source domain, which companies can invest in, even education institutes, anyone can invest in that. And all the difference is that you have to set up your own infrastructure. Since you might have to buy some GPUs, you can have a little bit of infrastructure costs associated with, you might need someone to manage that stuff. But actually doing this one-time capital investment is going to allow you to bring in these large language models or any kind of AI model locally and then be able to train it and run it without having this information go onto the internet for the companies to retrain it. It's all going to be within your own ecosystem.
For listeners who may not know what open source means, could you explain that?
Sure. So for open source, basically means that there's a lot of companies who have put their models out for use for public, they don't just give you access to the chat URL. Rather, they give you the actual model itself and they made it open. For example, Meta has done this with their Llama models. Google have done this with their Gamma models. Mistral has done it as well, where they actually give you the entire model. And now you can download this entire model to your local machine and run it locally without even having access to the internet. You can bring it to your local machine, turn your internet connections off, and just start querying the model. And since the whole thing is hosted locally on your own machine, you still have complete right to it. Your data doesn't go out, doesn't go anywhere. So open source basically means that they're just giving access openly to everyone and making it more accessible.
Thank you for explaining that. When we think about the open source opportunity, is this ability to run a more private and protected model. I think whenever, like you mentioned, government, I think when we talk about student data, especially students who are minors, we have to be really careful about the data that is put out there. And so there's ways to making sure that we're able to protect that information is important. If I was a superintendent or someone at a district and I was looking to invest in an AI tool, are there like an an AI tool that was specifically built for education but had an AI system that was running? What are things that I would need to pay attention to or questions that I should ask to make sure that my data would be protected in that system?
I think your first step in that field would be to do your own research, firstly, into any machine that you're buying, like any subscription model, anything that you're buying. Look up online because with all the machines out there, all the softwares out there, there are a lot of reviews online. There's a lot of information already available to you.
Mm.
So I would say first go through those Reddit channels, go through the information, go through the reviews, and actually understand what the system is doing, not just from the customer point, but how they're using your data on the back end. If you feel that these machines don't fit your use case, you should have an AI expert on hand where you hire someone who's well versed in the field of AI because there's a lot of terms and terminology that are tossed out there, especially in these systems that make it look all fancy. But actually, all you could be doing is paying for something that is not as great as they're making it look. So have someone who understands these technologies, make sure that they understand what is going on inside them. Make sure you explain to the person on your side, as well as try to get a whole most of these companies out there that have these systems available always have like a support page or a help page. Try to get in contact with them, especially when they're doing stuff with businesses. They're always ready to like talk to you to understand and go through your questions. So have your people meet their people. If it doesn't work out for you with this because of the data privacy regulations, because what we need to understand is that each company and each organization's values differ. So what I find important, maybe you don't, and what you find important, maybe I don't. And that's just the way organization is. So what the AI companies find important might not be what we find important. So if we're trying to build something and we have a lot of specific things that we want to pay attention to. The AI companies are either not able to accommodate your requests or they're just saying that this is what we're going to give you and that's it. I would say, again, open source is a great way to go because what happens then is that you're just getting the raw model. It is a bit of a capital expense by building a system around it, getting the infrastructure, getting the GPUs, but it is a one time expense. But what that allows you to do is imbibe your own values into the AI system. You're able to build, like, hire a couple of developers and tell them what you value, and you're able to build an AI system around this model that you pull down, which is open source, free to use. You're able to build an AI system that imbibes your cultural organization values and what you require there to be.
Yeah, you don't always when you build something yourself, you're able to have a better sense of what it is, if it's aligned with what you value, as you just said. And I think there's the safety or data privacy aspect that's really important too. As you were talking, I think there's a reality that a lot of education institutions won't have the capital to be able to build their own to take the open source and build their own model. But it is helpful to think about, okay, what questions should we ask? What do we need to understand going into those kind of conversations? What should you look for? When can you use a foundational model like ChatGPT or Claude, and when do you want something that's more tailored to the audience or to your use case? And I think all of these things are really important to think through because there's a tremendous amount of tools and things being made to help, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a value add to your organization. And so I think when you talked about values, just being really clear about what your values are, what you want to use this for, having some basic understanding of the technology is gonna be really important to anyone who begins to make these decisions.
Yes, definitely. And when it came to like whether or educational institutes could invest in them, what we're seeing with the scale with AI right now is that as time goes on, our cost for capital expense is dropping tremendously because the models are getting so much more powerful.
Mhm.
And what that basically means right now, it used to mean that they're gaining a lot more information, they're becoming more knowledgeable, but we've already reached that point where you can chat with any model and it's going to be able to converse with you good. When an AI model is becoming more powerful now, it also means that these large models are going to be able to be compressed into such smaller sizes that they're going to be able to run efficiently on easier infrastructure. That's also going to make it much cheaper for people to use in the end of the day. So I think as time goes on, we're going to see the amount that the capex investment to actually go down significantly. And all you're just going to have to do is maybe even just buy a single GPU, which is not that expensive.
If you're an innovative school district thinking like down the road, this is something that you're interested in, what are tasks or things that school districts could be doing or preparing to do if they wanted to build something custom like this for their institution?
Number one is getting your data ready because so many times, like I've worked on projects as an engineer itself, worked on projects where the person has such a grand idea and like amazing forethought. And as an engineer, I'm ready to get my hands dirty. But then the minute I'm there, we get stuck in a place where their data is not ready and our machines can't progress without their data. So I think the first step to do anything is to make sure that all the data is there and it's all in the right format and you're not going to be scouring for it, looking for it after the engineers are on site. You're going to have everything ready to just give them. I think that makes number one, it makes an engineer's life so much more easier because you're not dealing with that whole extra thing of like that layer of frustration where like, I really want to work, but I don't know how to progress from here because there's nothing for me. Number two, I think it would be like budget allocation, speaking to people, understanding even in different domains and fields how expensive this is looking, and then trying to draw parallels. Maybe you're the first educational institute that's doing it. Imagine you're the first. There are other fields that have done it which have relatively the same size of data. So maybe you can talk to people from cross domains and understand how they were doing it, what their costs were. And I think before you get started, it's always good to speak to three or four people who've already implemented their systems and understands where you need to learn from. So you're not reinventing the wheel. You're not facing all those problems again. You can skip past those early stage problems that come up with a lot of stuff and you know where to get your ground running. I think it's also important to have someone who is well versed in the field of AI be have access to you so that basically you can talk to them about your ideas and they can visualize out a system because sometimes it's hard for us to visualize this out a system without having the technical knowledge of AI. But if you have someone who's able to do that for you, or even nowadays there are many like LLM agents that are there to help you along with it. You know, you throw in your use case and it tells you what exactly you need. I think your planning should be really good before you start.
You've done a lot of explaining in our conversation today about how different things work and things people need to be aware of as they're thinking about implementing a system like this. As you have explained AI to people beyond just me, and you took your explainable AI course and or you TA'd for the explainable AI course, what have you learned about building trust and clarity for teams or organizations who are interested in using AI? particularly considering there are a lot of people in the United States right now who are very nervous about AI, the technology, and what that means for the future.
So when we talk about building trust and clarity, I think we need to understand that these AI systems should not be relied upon because they can make mistakes. And for example, if you open up ChatGPT and you even search any query, at the bottom itself, like on one of the largest companies out there, it's literally written ChatGPT can make mistakes. Please check your important information or something along those lines. And that's very important to know because AI is, in the end of the day, AI is a single file which contains the world's knowledge in it. These large language models, you can think of it like a single file. It contains the entire world's knowledge in it. So if you're querying it, there could be chances where it gives you the wrong information or makes this fact up, even makes up wrong things, like, stuff that completely doesn't exist, just made it up. And this is known as LLM hallucinations, like literally hallucinating. There's no actual grounding. So when it comes to people understanding and building trust, I think the first question you should ask, especially if you're putting your own information in there or you're getting data to feed to an AI, is just basically where is this information grounded in? I currently has access, like through a lot of softwares, to the internet, to stuff, and actually asking AI to cite its sources and like telling it like, hey, you're gonna give me this information, but I also want you to cite where you got it from. Actually helps the model a lot in picking out the right information and making sure it doesn't hallucinate or give you wrong facts because it's shown through prompt engineering and various techniques that just actually helps you bring out the right information. But also, if you're using an already existing online LLM, but someone else has fed the data to it or has fine tuned it, for example, you need to ask them where the data that they got was grounded. Make sure that if you're making synthetic data, if you're creating false, like even if you're creating false data to teach an LLM, it should be grounded somewhere. There should be a grounding source. And I think that's where your trust is going to lie because you have to be confident in the data that it was originally trained on to be confident of your answers.
It like, the trust comes down to understanding where does the information come from in the first place, and so if you're introducing using more AI with your team or your organization, really having maybe that as a norm, we're always gonna ask and try to understand where this came from, and then if we're post-training a model, we're gonna make sure that we understand what the data is that we're feeding into it so that the humans in the room can have a conversation and be on the same page.
Yeah, exactly. Like if we think about it like in like as a restaurant, like, we don't know where all the ingredients are from, but we somehow trust that it's put together, it's tasty, and it's not going to poison us or it's not going to make us feel ill. But if we actually cared about where it's from, I'm sure restaurants can trace their entire supply chain back to the source. And that's important, making sure you can trace the supply chain of the data that was given to you. Like, where was it got? How has it been transformed? What has been added on to it? Added on information, is that grounded somewhere? And then we set our models because at the end of the day, we don't know, like an LLM is a black box. We don't know what's going on inside it. There are trillions of connections and tiny small things that are getting activated, not activated. And there's so much going on in there that it's basically impossible for us to quite truly understand what's going on inside. But what we do have control over is what we feed it. What we do have control over is what we ask it. So prompting it in the right way so that it can give out citations, it can help it navigate to the right information for you. That's important. But also, as you said, while we're post training it after or fine tuning it, that information that we're giving it, we have access to as well. So making sure that's correct.
I love your restaurant analogy. I'm imagining, if you went to a restaurant and you had gotten food poisoning before, you might be very cautious, or you heard about someone, food poisoning being our hallucination analogy right now, and you're sitting there. If you might ask, how long did this food sit out before I got here? Or you could
Exactly.
ask that waiter questions, and then you could feel safer in how you were using it and more secure because you had the information that you needed. So The restaurant analogy is good, Vihaan. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I want to think now about responsible use of AI. So I think for organizations who want to adopt AI, what does responsible use look like? And then for students or people teaching students, what does it look like for a student to responsibly use AI?
Responsibility comes in many facets over here. Firstly, there is the responsible use in the sense that it should be used for only ethical use cases. And ethical use cases are as abundant as the ethical use cases. And it's very easy for people to diverge onto that path. Having your values set, having stuff done before, it's very important to make sure that this is all done beforehand, but there are so many other stuff when it comes to responsible use. For example, are we using it right for the climate? Because these AI systems access large data centers and they're using our electricity. So are we using it good in that front? Does responsible AI mean that we are making sure that we're using AI, but we're also using our own critical thinking? We're not making our own brain rot away while the AI does the heavy lifting. We don't become lazy in the process. There's so many facets of AI that needs to be done responsibly. If I start getting into it one by one, when it comes to the first point, ethical use of I think it's important that, firstly, as an organization or as a student or as an educational institution, we set our values straight. We understand what is ethical and what is unethical for our use case. We make sure that we talk to not just the builders of the AI system about this, but also the users. The users should be as educated as well. Prevents unethical uses from happening. So we can do this by incorporating various types of safety guardrails inside, making sure if a student is asking to cheat on an examination, a normal ChatGPT would allow it because that is not part of their values as what they consider unethical. But as an educational institute, you would consider it unethical. So if the student is trying to cheat on an examination, if they use ChatGPT, it would probably give them the answer. But if we're giving them a system that we've built, then we as an educational institute need to put in those safety guardrails saying that, hey, if a student is trying to cheat on an examination or ask questions that are trying to give them an answer, instead of giving them direct answer, teach them how to think, teach them how to go down this process of problem solving. So I think that's very important as like to basically set your guardrails straight and also set your values straight. When it comes to climate, AI is, as much as it's helping us, it's also destroying us because there is so much bad that's happening with the increasing use of energy. At my time in Duke, I have been a core team member of the club called the Pratt Energy and Sustainability Club, Pratt being the engineering school of Duke. I am one of the core members in the Pratt Energy and Sustainability Club. And we spent the entire time last year in the Responsible AI symposium that happened in Duke, where all we did, we came into that symposium asking amazing leaders, amazing people in the space what they feel about sustainability in AI. You know, it's such a question that is not asked because people often just look past it thinking that they just type question in and some magic happens and they get an answer. But they don't understand what's exactly happening in the back end. In the back end, there are mega data centers that are actually processing your requests. Just like you, there are millions of other users querying the system at the same time. So handling these requests become quite expensive. As a part of my research last year in the Energy and Sustainability Club, we saw this particular document that was released by the Department of Energy. And they said that by 2028, that they're assuming that 6.7 to 12% of the entire United States electricity is going to be consumed by data centers. And this is a huge number. There 12% of our entire electricity produced is going to be by data centers. That's quite frankly crazy. We need to understand the macro impact of this.
When you were talking, I was thinking just about how it's as an individual, you are one person using these systems. But then if you're leading a large organization like a school or a business, you actually are contributing to a bigger impact when it comes to that energy usage. And so I think for leaders, there's a consideration that is a little bit different than for individuals. And so, from your perspective and your research, how should leaders navigate wanting to capitalize on this technology and all the benefits, but also knowing that there's a big impact on our electricity grid and our environment? And then how do you lead accordingly? Like, do you have advice or thoughts or perspective on that?
So I think the first thing we need to do is understand what is a machine and what is human. The reason I say this is because there's this funny little tweet that came out from Sam Altman where he talks about how people are being polite to AI and that's actually costing tens and millions of dollars in the electric grid. Where basically they're saying hi, they're saying thank you. Even those small queries that you're sending back and forth to the AI, they're not required. You don't actually have to be polite to a machine. If you had a system like your washing machine, after you're done with your laundry, you're not going to say thank you. But people are actually querying these systems and saying, thank you for explaining this to me. And that's it. But what happens on the back end is that this actually goes as a query to the data center, to their server, OpenAI servers, or whoever server you're querying, and actually gets processed with the same amount of weight that any other query would be processed, right? So that funny little tweet by Sam Altman was just explaining that you don't have to say hello to an AI system. You don't have to say thank you. All that's doing is just increasing the load on the electric grid. So when it comes to building these systems, I think the first step is understanding that make sure your manners are there when you're talking to humans. But when you're talking to AI, be very efficient with the way you speak. Make sure your prompts, the stuff that you're telling it, are to the point, concise, and only what is required, because that's going to help the AI systems to get done with your query really quickly and give you the information that you need. So it's not just helping environment, it's helping you out because it's going to help you get precise information really quickly. I truly believe like if you're building your own AI system and you need to also do energy audits, you need to figure out how much energy your systems are going to take up, how much extra strain are you putting on, and make sure that what value you are gaining from this AI system is much better than the strain you are putting on the environment. I think you need to keep updating these AI systems. As I mentioned, as time goes on, these systems are becoming so much more powerful. With what you could once do with such a large model, you're now going to be able to do with a smaller model. As these AI systems keep getting updated, make sure your organization is up with the trends and also reducing the size of these models as they become more powerful. Because you're then going to not just bring your own electricity bill down, but you're also going to be helping out the environment as a whole.
Right. It's this awareness that what we do doesn't operate in a vacuum and there is an impact that's beyond ourselves when we are talking to these intelligent machines, the generative AI model you're using. It's not just magic. There's actually a data center, there's an impact, there's things that happen that you can't see, but that doesn't mean they're not there.
Exactly. On the back end, with all your extra queries that you send in the end, it's just fossil fuels that are being burned and released into the air that we breathe. So it's better to just keep up to date. There are a lot of people out there who are continuously working on, and government officials continuously investing money into making this smaller and more compressed so that you can fit it into your pocket and make sure that while that's happening, your organization is doing the same. Don't just develop it and leave it there and then make everyone use it, but rather keep updating and keep reducing your costs.
Thank you so much for sharing that and bringing that ethical component to the forefront of people's minds because I think this technology is incredible and powerful and useful. Also, there's environmental impacts, and most things are more complicated than what they see and have a macro impact. And so, taking time to understand that, I think, is really, really important. And my
Right.
last question, Vihan, which may be everything you just said, but I always end this show by asking if there's an idea, question, a hope, something that kind of stays with you when you think about artificial intelligence, maybe the thing that keeps you up at night. What's on your mind right now? What do you keep thinking about in the AI space?
these models are improving, their capabilities are improving, and it's making us as human beings more redundant because it's going to be able to do a lot of the heavy lifting. What got me thinking about this is that I saw this funny tweet online where someone said, it was like, as time goes on, I would like AI to do my dishes so that I could focus on art. But the way it's going right now is that AI is doing the art while I'm focusing on my dishes. And I think that's quite startling to me because, there's a lot of stuff that people actually enjoy doing. For example, creativity, inventions, discoveries, engineering, so many fields that AI can impact and can get done much quicker. So I think what keeps me up and makes me think about is, as this keeps moving on, as this field keeps progressing, how do I stay relevant? How do I make sure that I am collaborating with AI rather than being replaced by AI? And I think the only conclusion that I have drawn in this statement, a lot of people in the world are taking the same thing as well. I think the only conclusion that I've drawn is that staying up to date on the technology, making sure that in whatever I'm doing, understanding, is there a space where AI could help me? And if it helped me, what could I focus on rather? And, having a clear distinction of making sure that AI is doing the redundant work so that you can focus on something new rather than AI doing the new work while you're focusing on something redundant. That's what keeps me going every day and why I like to be so involved in the field.
It's really interesting because you are in the field of AI and you're worried about the thing that everyone is worried about. What does my work look like down the road? How am I choosing to use my time? What am I allowing AI to do for me? And then what am I doing in response to that? I really appreciate you sharing that you have some of those same thoughts because we're all kind of in this space trying to figure out what does it look like to live in a world with technology that can do so much of what we used to do as people. And you're thinking that even as you work on these machines directly, so that's really interesting.
It definitely, because at the end of the day, the only people who know the true extent of what AI can be in our visible future is probably these large organizations. And we need to understand that maybe their interests are not our best interest. So we need to make sure to stay relevant, always make sure you're upskilling, make sure you're involving AI in your everyday workflows and understand and not have it surprise you later on. Like after 3 years, you decide like, hey, let me just start with AI and it's got so advanced that everything you're doing is now redundant, right? Rather have it as AI is growing incrementally, you grow with it and you keep evolving with it because it's still growing. So your role as a human being in that particular domain that you're in is also growing. Be actively involved and figure out how you can grow with it.
That's a wrap on our conversation with Vihaan Nama, AI engineer at PS&S, researcher at Duke's Trust Lab, and TA for some of the most relevant graduate courses in AI today. Vihaan's work shows how explainability, peer learning, and real world use cases make the difference between compliance and curiosity. If your school or district is navigating these same questions, check out the Kinwise AI Leadership Series. It's a 5 session cohort that equips leadership teams with clear vision, guardrails, and a living AI roadmap. The next cohort starts January 26th. Visit kinwise.org to learn more. And if you found value in today's episode, the best way to support the show is to subscribe, leave a quick review, or share it with a friend. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and stay Kinwise.